You know, every society, every single thing we've ever built, has been powered by one thing, an energy surplus. It's the silent engine that drives all of human history. So in this explainer, we're going to take a journey through the four great energy cycles that have shaped us, from our earliest ancestors right up to the critical crossroads we face today. Let's get into it.
This quote, it really sets the stakes, doesn't it? Energy isn't just some commodity. It's the fundamental prerequisite for literally everything we do. Without it, our incredibly complex world just stops. So understanding how we've harnessed energy is really understanding the story of us.
All right, to guide us on this journey, we need one key concept. It's called socio-metabolism. Now, I know it sounds a little academic, but the idea is actually pretty simple. Think of it this way. Just like a living creature, a society has a metabolism. It takes in resources and energy from the environment, it processes them to function, and then it produces outputs. This framework lets us see history in a new light, not just as a story of kings and empires, but as a series of totally distinct metabolic regimes.
Okay, so Chapter 1. Our story begins exactly where all life on Earth does, with the sun. For the vast, vast majority of human history, we lived directly off the sun's immediate daily energy. First by just taking what nature gave us, and later by learning how to actively manage it.
So this was our first metabolic regime. Hunter-gatherers were, you could say, masters of passive solar energy. They didn't plant crops, they foraged for plants and hunted the animals that fed on those plants. And fire. Fire was an absolutely crucial piece of tech. It wasn't just for warmth. It actually unlocked new food sources by making things that were inedible or even poisonous digestible. And because survival was so tough, sharing wasn't just a nice thing to do, it was probably the most effective form of social insurance ever invented.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how this first great energy transition was about so much more than just food. The shift from foraging to farming, that's from passive to active solar energy, it completely rewired human society. We went from being constantly on the move to being settled. And with settlement came all these new concepts that had barely existed before, like private property, accumulating wealth, and for the first time, real social hierarchy.
And the scale of this leap, it was huge. As societies switched over to agriculture, the metabolic rate, so the amount of energy and stuff used per person, shot up 3 to 4 times. This was a revolutionary jump. It allowed for way higher population densities, and it literally paved the way for the first towns and cities. So the big takeaway here is our first energy revolution didn't just change how we ate, it fundamentally changed how we lived together.
So for thousands of years, these agrarian societies thrived, but they were always bound by the limits of the land and the sun. And then we found a key that unlocked a vast inheritance of ancient sunlight that was stored deep within the earth. And this discovery, well, it would change everything, all over again.
So here's the crucial point. Agrarian economies all operated under what's called the photosynthetic constraint. All of their energy, for food, for fuel, for animal power, you name it, had to come from what could be grown in a single year. This created a hard limit, a ceiling. As populations grew, land became more and more scarce, which created this intense competition between forests for fuel, pastures for animals, and fields for food. By the 1500s, parts of Europe were facing a serious energy shortage.
And this quote just illustrates the breakthrough perfectly. Fossil fuels, we're talking coal, then later oil and gas, they're nothing less than millions of years of concentrated, stored-up solar energy. Tapping into this massive underground reserve of ancient sunlight allowed societies to completely shatter that photosynthetic constraint. For the first time ever, our energy supply wasn't limited by the surface area of the land.
And just look at this jump. It's staggering. The Industrial Revolution didn't just nudge our energy use up. It created a completely new order of magnitude. The amount of energy available to industrial society absolutely dwarfed everything that had ever come before, fueling this unprecedented explosion in population, production, and consumption.
But this new energy regime didn't just power machines, it powered entirely new ways of thinking. The sheer abundance of fossil energy shaped the intellectual foundations of our modern world. Ideas about individual rights, free markets, and the division of labor from thinkers like Locke and Smith, they flourished in this new era of expansion. And, of course, in response, so did their most powerful critiques, like Marx's theories of capital and exploitation, which saw this new system as being inherently unequal.
Now here's a really fascinating twist. You'd think that making something more efficient, like James Watt's steam engine, would mean we'd use less coal, right? But an economist named William Stanley Jevons noticed the exact opposite was happening. Making coal use more efficient actually made it cheaper, which spurred more demand and created all sorts of new uses for it. The result? Total consumption went through the roof. This is the Jevons paradox, and it's a pattern that has pretty much defined the industrial era. The big takeaway from this whole chapter is that fossil fuels gave us unimaginable power, reshaping our societies and our ideas, but they also locked us into a cycle of ever-increasing consumption.
And that, of course, brings us to today. That incredible carbon inheritance that fueled the modern world, well, it's come with a cost that we're only now starting to fully understand. We find ourselves at a new crossroads, facing a whole series of interconnected challenges that demand another great transformation of our socio-metabolism.
So, navigating this transition means we have to tackle 3 core challenges all at once. First, there's the financial challenge. How do we channel investment to where it's needed most? Then there's the absolutely crucial labor imperative. How do we ensure that the shift away from fossil fuels is a just transition that doesn't leave entire communities behind? And overarching everything is the ecological imperative. We have to realign our entire economy with the finite limits of our planet.
And the scale of this transformation is just immense. It goes deep. This isn't just about swapping a gas car for an EV. It demands systemic change across at least 6 major domains. We're talking about rebuilding physical infrastructure like power grids, rewriting regulations, reorienting finance, navigating the new geopolitics of critical minerals, and creating new social safety nets and entirely new supply chains. It's a total overhaul.
You know, underlying all the debates about how to make this transition are 2 fundamentally different philosophies. The weak sustainability view basically believes that technology and human ingenuity can effectively replace any natural resources we deplete. But the strong sustainability view argues that some things, like, say, a stable climate or biodiversity, are foundational. They're non-substitutable. You can't just invent a replacement. And which of these views you hold really shapes your entire approach to the problem.
So where do we go from here? Well, this complex reality has given rise to 2 powerful and competing visions for the future of our society's metabolism. And this really frames the great debate of our time.
So on one side, you have what's called eco-modernism. This view argues that we can and we must use technology, things like advanced nuclear power and carbon capture, to decouple our economic growth from environmental harm. It sees humanity as earth makers, capable of innovating our way to a prosperous, high-energy, and sustainable future. On the other side is the degrowth movement. They argue that the core problem is the relentless pursuit of growth itself. They advocate for a planned, democratic reduction of production and consumption in wealthy nations to bring our economy back within the planet's boundaries, shifting our focus away from GDP and toward human well-being. For instance, by investing in public services and reducing work hours instead of just maximizing output.
From the very first controlled fire to the dream of a fusion reactor, our relationship with energy has dictated everything. Our social structures, our economies, even our philosophies. It has defined who we are. So as we stand here at the threshold of the next great energy transition, the real question we face isn't just about technology or policy. It's about who we as a global civilization will choose to become.